Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, April 5th at 9 a.m., and this is the Affordable Housing Growth and Development Trust Fund Board meeting. Um, I'll just note that in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I must inquire as to whether anybody is taping this meeting and to please make their presence known. Okay, seeing none. We'll call the meeting to order. I'll do a roll call for everything, certainly, but for this, Laura Schufelt,
Present.
Wendy Northcross,
Present.
Mark Meld,
Present.
Mark Els here, and Andy Clyburn is absent. Okay, thank you. I'll ask if there's anybody here from the public at this point that would like to make comment. All right, seeing none, I will move to the topics for discussion. First topic of discussion, potential revisions to the notice of funding availability. And Jillian and Elizabeth Jenkins will be giving us an overview at this point. So who and how would you like to do this?
Thank you, Town Manager Els. I will kick off and then I will turn it over to Jillian. And just a quick introduction. I think we're all aware, but the Housing Trust has issued notices of funding availability in the past to help communicate to our housing community the availability of funds, as well as establish evaluation criteria and expectations for funding awards. The trust has not updated their NOFA since 2022. The current NOFA that is in place establishes pre-development funds and development funds as eligible activities. Considering the awards that the trust has made recently, the trust has a remaining balance of $4,687,120 in unencumbered funds available. And these are primarily, of course, from Community Preservation Act funds. In evaluating the opportunity to use these funds and, again, to market them to the affordable housing community, Jillian and I have both observed the costs of construction and labor, which have continued to rise, and they continue to widen the gap between what it costs to construct affordable housing and the return on investment needed to move projects forward. Jillian has been collecting some data on activities of other trusts in the region, as well as construction costs, and I will turn it over to her to review that information with the board.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So what I had included in the packet is information from the Home Consortium, primarily because that was the most complete information that I had. I think Laura has pointed out that these are not exactly comparable to the types of projects that we're funding, but I felt it was indicative. It shows very clearly that the gap is widening. The cost, I guess, just between 2021 and 2023, the construction cost per square foot between the projects that the Home Consortium took on had increased by about 50%. The total costs, the total development costs increased even more, almost 80%. And so we were feeling it is important to address that because since 2022, obviously things have changed. In our NOFA, we have caps. And as we go through with what we were suggesting for changes, obviously those are policy decisions and we'll be looking to you for guidance on that. I don't know if there's really any, did anybody have questions about any of the information that was included?
Great question. Probably, I don't know if they're going to go.
Laura, please.
You can ask.
I have comments. I don't know if you want comments yet.
Sure.
So as Jillian said that, we had a conversation because these are not, apples to apples for the kind of projects that we have seen in finance. All of these projects have low-income housing tax credits in them. Low-income housing tax credit, and they're all between 30 and 48 units. We haven't done that. And they're all affordable, or 95% affordable. Some have a couple of market units. But I think what's more indicative of trust participation, again, these are not apples to apples to what the projects we've seen. I'd love to see these projects, but we haven't seen them. Just to give you an idea, the highest contribution from a trust or CPA in these projects is just under $70,000 a unit. And that's for one in Falmouth that had a $2.2 million acquisition that was paid for by CPA, and then site costs of over $2 million because of contamination. And so the CPA paid for more than half of that. The most recent one, Cape View Way, which I was supposed to be at a ground meeting for later this morning, but got canceled. CPA gave $8,800. Yarmouth Gardens has a wastewater treatment plant that the CPA paid for at $1.3 million, but that still, with 40 units, was $33,800 a unit. So I'm not saying we should go down to, somewhere in the $30,000 to $50,000, but I think 200, which is proposed, is too much per unit. It's the construction costs here. Tax credits add fixed costs that are, whether you have 30 units or 60 units, it's the same fixed cost pretty much. And again, these are all affordable, mostly around 40 units, not what we're funding. And when we look at the projects that we are funding, the per unit costs are not $600,000. So I think we have to look at, reality, what we're funding, and adjust our NOFA to that. I agree that we need to increase, and we've certainly approved increased, but I don't agree with the amount. We would get 15 units or 20 units out of that $4 million. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. 1 minute, Elizabeth. Any other board member comment at this time? Wendy?
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask, Laura kind of got to it, but I was going to ask, so what are we funding? Because in my view, we're not funding anything. I mean, we're kind of at a standstill, and I think adjusting what we can put out on the street might generate some projects that we just haven't been seeing. So I would just love to hear Laura's comment. Describe better what we are funding, Laura.
Well, what we've been asked to fund have been, mostly under 10 units, gut rehabs, or some new construction between, Ridgewood, some of Jake's projects that we've been asked to do. Again, all of them very small projects, a few units at a time, and an 850, which was just in a category that hopefully we don't go back to. So, we haven't, on the new projects that are being proposed, we haven't seen any asks yet. I don't know if we're getting them, or if Jillian and Elizabeth have seen them. It's another, I'd like to see them when they come in, but we haven't seen that. So I don't know if we're going to get anything from Wynn or any asks from them beyond what, you know, beyond the 10% that they're required to do for us. So
Okay, thank you, Laura. Thanks for the question, Wendy. Did that answer your question? Okay, good. Elizabeth, Mark, you have anything?
I just, yeah, question for clarification for Laura. So these comparables that they've provided to us, you stated that they all involved low-income housing tax credits. We're not seeing projects coming before this board that have those.
right.
How do we create that? How do we get the projects in Barnstable eligible for these low-income housing tax credits so that we can kind of steer our funds more towards these larger developments with more units? What are we missing here?
Well, of the 7 projects that were listed, 6 of them were either housing authority land or town land. And the majority of them were at no cost. You know, they were donated, you know, after a procurement process. The only one that was purchased was the one with the CPA gave $3.3 million. The rest are all town-owned land. We haven't put anything on the streets except for 2 units in Marston's Mills, which is not gonna generate tax credits. Require at least 30 units. 30 is on the low end in order to access them. And the reason and they're all majority affordable. And so if you add acquisition costs in for the price of land that we have now, it's unusual unless the you know, town is going to participate in the you know, in helping to fund the acquisition as well as subsidize the units. So that's really
okay. A follow-up question, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman. So the town donating the land seems to be a key component to making these affordable or housing units eligible for tax credits. Okay.
right. And the tax credits is just a very quick, it provides about $225,000 to $250,000 per unit in private equity that it's awarded by the state and based on the construction and soft costs. And then there's an equity investor that actually owns 99.9% for the 15 years they're in. And the money comes in during construction, so it lowers carrying costs or construction interest. And so there's the federal tax credits. It's usually piggybacked with state tax credits, which again gives a lower amount, but for the same period of time and the same equity coming in. And then it's usually augmented by other state funds because that's the 250 isn't enough, obviously, to close the gap on these units long term. So if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth, did you have anything different to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think my comments were similar to, my observations were similar to Wendy's, is that instead of funding what we have, instead of basing our notice of funding ability on what we have retroactively been funding, you know, I would encourage the trust to look forward and base our numbers based on set our numbers based on what we aspire to fund, which looks like projects that, you know, that are on this sheet. You know, I will tell you, we probably met with, you know, a half a dozen affordable housing developers working with low income housing tax credits in the past few months. And yeah, land is certainly an issue. But they are certainly, you know, they do not react well to the $75,000 to $100,000 cap that is currently in place. You know, when you look at these three projects, and, you know, I don't know the specifics of them, but, you know, three of them have very significant acquisition costs. 800,000, 2.2 million, 1.4 million. But at the end of the day, when you average them out, the average cost per unit in these projects is, at least the ones done in 2023, is $623,000 for the affordable units. So yes, I mean, I think we are certainly doing our part to try to market to and engage with low-income housing tax credit developers. We do have the WIN project. They haven't filed an application or a letter of intent, but we have been in conversations with them, and we do anticipate that they will come before the board. You know, again, we have $4.6 million. We're doing projects that are a couple of units at a time. I sat through an hour and a half of public comment at town council last night, urging our community to make bolder choices relative to providing affordable housing. And I think budgeting the funds that we have available to us in order to support bigger projects going forward is a wise choice.
Laura, I have a specific question for Laura to help me better understand why you know your I think apprehension or you know perhaps more than that. But for me, when I read through the NOFA, it says we can go up to. It doesn't obligate us to. And then, you know, based on what we hear as a board, then we can make a decision what we believe to be appropriate. So raising this from 75 to 200, what is help me with the concern there, because I'm not understanding it.
Okay, so my concern is that we're going to get, you know, a half dozen 5-unit developments, and at 200, and if it's outside of Hyannis, it's up to 300. The problem is that we say up to, but we go over. And so we have a history of going over what we say up to. We have never capped ours at the cap that we have. So if we say up to 200 and a project limit of $1 million, or I think the project limit went up to 2 million, everyone is going to expect that's what they're going to get. So we'll get 5 units or 10 units for $2 million twice, and then we have $600,000, you know, and three more units after that. So we have under 25 units for our 4.6. I think in order to attract the kind of projects that we want, we need to be proactive and say, we have this land, we want 40 units on this land, or we want 30 units on this land. And that's not happening. We have land. We have, you know, I have money for pre-development. We have money for pre-development. All these projects, I did the RFPs for. All these town-owned ones. I worked with them on pre-development. It's frustrating to me that we wring our hands and we you know, we kind of fight about how much is in there with no one coming in, because we're not being proactive and saying, we have this, come to our town. It's got to be more than just, we have $200,000 or $300,000 a unit, come and do 5 units. You know, we're not getting there that way. We're not taking the proactive steps that we need to meet the needs that we have. And it's not just about spending the money, it's about, you know, responding to the needs that we have that we're not doing, honestly.
Elizabeth.
I guess I would counter that and say we have something that no other town has on the Cape, which is by right multifamily zoning in multiple locations throughout the town of Barnstable. We have sewer infrastructure, so people don't have to build their own on-site wastewater infrastructure. And we have a regulatory system that comes in and lets folks get a building permit instead of dealing with multiple years of entitlement. So to say we are not being proactive relative to inviting housing in our community, I have to take issue with, because we have hundreds of units on the pipeline where many of these other towns have, you know, a project or two. So I think we have gone to great lengths to send a message that we are inviting housing and affordable housing within our community. And frankly, if the trust could invite half a dozen small scale projects that were affordable into our community, I would be thrilled with that. And I think our community would too. We're struggling with these larger projects from a community perspective. I would want to fund those smaller projects specifically out of Hyannis. I think we have to open ourselves up to all of the options. We don't have a lot of town-owned property. You know, the time it will take to go out, acquire property, do pre-development. I mean, we're doing that. We're doing that at Marston's Mill School, for example, but that's going to be a long project that takes a long time and is waiting for sewer infrastructure. We should take advantage of what we have, of the folks who are interested and the folks who have the ability to build by right housing in our community.
Laura?
Well, I would just say with 10% affordable, which isn't, no one's coming in on those projects with affordable projects.
So let's up our caps and convince them to add more affordable units into those projects, because right now the return on investment that they're getting for $75,000, $100,000 is not enticing anybody to increase them. And if we've done the numbers, we did it with Judy Barrett, you know, if we up that number too much more, like we know, even on a huge project, if we go much above 13, it's going to take it all together. So, you know, I think we need the housing, and we have to be careful that we are not setting our regulations and our limits in such a way that it's going to drive it away.
So, Wendy, did you have another question? Or
No, I was just, you know, I guess you can always count on me to be on the opposite hand from Laura, but you know, I personally believe and feel and know the costs of everything have gone up. I mean, the cost of employee wages has risen 24% since the pandemic, and that's a good thing, but it's still not enough to offset what the increasing costs are for everything. And I think that having some, you know, I appreciate that this is not apples and apples project comparison, but I think the truth is everything's more expensive, and it's happening so rapidly that it's hard to A, believe it, or B, get our arms around it. So I think that we are certainly in a position where we have money that's just sitting there that needs to be put into action. I think that we have to look at bumping these limits up and enticing some people to really consider this. I mean, things don't pencil out, they don't get done. People are not building the housing out of the kindness of their hearts, technically. You know, I mean, there's a few examples out there, but I think it's up to us to use the resources that we have to react to a very dynamic marketplace and do everything that we can. I don't think we have a ton of land. Excuse me. I don't think we have a ton of public land that we own and can control that's ideal, because we've been looking at that for years now. So I'm all for understanding, you know, an 80% 80% increase in housing costs in just a few years. That's enormous. Wage rates are up. The cost of labor, I know the construction trades, they steal from each other. So they need that labor so badly that they'll pay their people immense amounts of money, which is great to keep them, but then they'll get stolen by another company and they're going to hire new people, so that's just ratcheted up wages within the construction industry. I mean, that's real and that's going on. Never mind the cost of goods, the cost of wood and materials. So is our fault? No, but we have $4.5 million that we can deploy and put into action. I think we should try something. I mean, what's the worst that can happen is we say no.
I just, if I could, oh, Laura, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, I wasn't that I do think we need to increase the and I said that from the beginning, I just think that what's in there, the 200 to 300 is too much. I think if we settled on 100 to 150, I can, that's more in line. I think that it is, that, obviously costs have gone up. Costs in Massachusetts or Eastern Massachusetts are higher than most areas in the country, for who knows what reason, but they are. But again, we're not seeing these $600,000 a unit is not what it is for typical developments, and not the ones that we've been seeing. So that's all. Will it bring projects in? Yes, but again, it'll be 1 or 2 units at a time, and we'll be out of money without having any real impact on addressing the needs.
Elizabeth, did you have another?
I was going to ask Jillian, I'm being vocal, but Jillian was the one who proposed the numbers in the NOFA. I was just going to ask her, the basis for putting those numbers in, Jillian.
Well, honestly, there isn't a whole lot of basis because I didn't have a lot of data about market rate projects. So I mean, really, I was just trying to spark the conversation with some numbers, but yeah, I mean, you have latitude. It's your money. You decide how much you want to apply.
And I think and I think to Mark's point, the NOFA is a marketing tool. Certainly it is something that we are putting out there to try to set expectations and to try to get projects in the door. Every project is going to be unique. I mean, again, maybe I'm seeing it wrong, but I would be happy if we could spend our funds down doing a large portfolio of small scale projects. I think it is our goal to spend our money down, and that should be seen as a positive, not a negative. But I do think that I think Ruth did a lot of amazing work to try to set up a fairly elaborate system of metrics for consistently evaluating projects. But to both Mark and Laura's point, I think we see that, each project that we see coming forward is wildly unique, and that certainly the trust has the ability to be flexible in what they actually award based on the value and what their money is leveraging in each project.
Yes, Laura.
I would just say that if we have the latitude, it has to be not coming to us as a done deal that has already been negotiated, that it has to be that we have to see it at the beginning, so that if we have latitude, we have to have it there. What we're seeing is they come to us saying, this is what we've been told we can get, or this is, and that's backwards. The board has to have the discretion, to reduce the number. If, you can make pro formas say whatever you want them to say. So if they start with, we have 200,000 from the town per unit, and then back into, and the other problem is that no one's leveraging, those small projects don't leverage any money, and they can, and they don't. And so, anyone else's money but ours.
So, can I ask a question? I'm the chair, of course I can.
Of course.
So I'll do an observation, and then just listening to this, I'll make a suggestion. It's kind of a complicated one, but relevant to the tax credits, and I mean, I've been on the board for 12 years, and I have not seen us successfully be able to put forward municipal land. Now, there could be many reasons why that is the case, but I think that it is difficult for us to do this. So if maybe in another discussion we can talk about not what any other community does, but why Barnstable struggles with that, and see where we conclude that discussion. So that's an observation on my part. listening to this discussion and hearing what Jillian and Elizabeth have suggested and what, what Laura's saying about how we implement from the first discussion through to the board and our votes. And really hearing Elizabeth respond to Laura in that we would like to see those projects, but more likely this is what we are seeing. Is there some way, perhaps, Laura, and especially with these maximums, um, is there some way to incentivize and maybe say that per unit for smaller developments go up to 150 maximum? But if we get the type of project that might merit a $200,000 consideration per unit, that we would do that maximum? I mean, to me, there might be right now I'm concerned that we're not getting a lot with our NOFAs. So, and maybe if what I've said has any merit, beyond that, we all commit that with 1 year from the vote, we take this all under advisement. We look at how it's working.
Is there any place in
If it's
particular
too
where you
much, we'll
absolutely
modify
do
it. And if
not want
it's
to
not
condense
enough,
it?
we've got another decision to make. But I mean, that's always available to us anyways. But I think to kind of formally structure this in a way to end up with incentives in the NOFA that actually yield what we're looking for is what I'm trying to figure out here. And then I'm listening to this discussion. And I don't know if there's any merit to what I've just said. That's all. But I'm certainly willing, especially again, where these are maximums, it's not, okay, you come in, this is what you get. And it's at our review that I'm not uncomfortable with raising those numbers. What's your thoughts on what I've just said? Laura, please.
I think that, I would definitely be clearer in the NOFA about the range that, because right now it's like it was before, just with different numbers. It needs to say what you just said, Mark. If you want to go up to those numbers, I'm outvoted, but it needs to be clearer that it starts, at 150. But I think also we have to look at what the priorities are, because those priorities are from CPA back when CPA started in 2006, because I helped put them together. And the world has changed. And so we need to look at what we're incentivizing. Because Elizabeth said there's, by right multifamily, but what is there outside of Hyannis? Not a lot. So,
Okay.
we're prioritizing rentals outside of Hyannis, but we have the zoning for it and the swifter, more predictable process in Hyannis. So we have to make our incentives match town goals. And some of the goals is to get it outside of Hyannis. I've been, banging that drum for years. But let's get our priorities straight so that we can evaluate what, whether a project deserves to have higher or shows the need to have higher and is hitting our target populations and our priority, town priorities.
Thank
Can
you.
I just add a piece of information to that, Town Manager Els?
Yes.
The Planning and Development Department worked with the CPC to comprehensively revise their action plan in 2022. And I actually want to note that the CPC rejected the trust priority to prioritize affordable rental in areas outside of Hyannis. They included the trust priority in their updated plan, but made it very clear that they wanted to fund affordable housing, period. And they wrote their own evaluation criteria. It's why I included it in your packet. So that did not, I think the goal was to, and we all sat down and sort of had this conversation, was again to reflect the trust priorities. But I have to say there was a considerable amount more urgency in that discussion with CPC, and there continues to be, to spend money on good projects, regardless of their location.
Okay, Laura?
I'll just say that in the evaluation criteria, it lists, I think, at least it said it was the CPC.
No, this is the trust evaluation criteria, but to your point, yeah, so the trust action plan imports the CPC action plan and trust imports the trust priorities, but then sets their own, which are broader. Ellen and I actually went back and reviewed the minutes and discussions to make sure we were reflecting that right. But, you know, to your point and to Mark's position, you know, I think part of updating this NOFA was to take a look at that evaluation criteria. And if we can craft this morning a statement that, you know, that I think encompasses that position that Mark just took relative to leveraging funds in large and small projects, including that in our evaluation criteria. I think that would be certainly helpful for staff and, you know, to communicate to prospective applicants the potential expectations when they apply to the trust. So, you know, I can certainly open up the document and we can walk through it, but I would say, you know, as part of this revision wasn't just the numbers, it was to make sure we were taking a look at that evaluation criteria as well.
Okay, so board members, where are we on this one? What are your, oh, sorry, Jillian, did you have another comment?
Well, just to bring us back to the thought of a sliding scale based on the project size. I mean, obviously that's going to take a little bit of research but I guess that's what I'm hearing, and I thank you for that. I will work on some of that.
Well, I would just say, you know, I certainly respect, you know, all of your opinions. And as chair, and I'm always very sensitive as a town manager, many times I say things and people proceed because I say them rather than proceed because they have merit. So my real question to Laura and to Elizabeth and Jillian is, does what I just said, does it have merit? Should we consider it? Might that be one way that we could move forward with this? Not Jillian, go do it. Okay, that's all. Oh, what? Hold on, Wendy, and then Laura.
Well, so a sliding scale of money, if for less money for fewer units, but you still have the same construction and labor costs, unless the land acquisition is different. So just thinking that through, to me, the broader we state this and then give the trust the ability to project by project adjust our thinking seems prudent, because I don't know what the sliding scale, if you're going to say, you know, 5 units gets X and 30 units gets Y, but you still have the same construction costs.
The only reason I suggested it in my very simple thought was it would incentivize the types of projects
Right.
that Laura suggested and that Elizabeth said, yeah, we'd love to have those. So that's all. It was just more looked at, not to quantify and compare, but to potentially incentivize somebody to say, wow, Barnstable can give up to this amount. Would our project be viable there? That's all. Now, that may have no merit in this type of market, but that was my thought. Laura?
Just have one other thought when Laura's done.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit in the reverse, that the smaller projects need more. But to incentivize, you know, larger projects, it's going to be a gap filler if they're looking at tax credits, and that's why it's 70,000 or below per unit, even in the most expensive ones. So um, I think, again, I think 150 is a pretty good incentive to do it beyond. Again, we didn't talk about the 10%. We'll get to that, but beyond the beyond the 10%. And again, if we saw the projects before they were, written in stone, we might be able to, have a better idea of the priorities that they're hitting or not hitting, and be able to then have the discretion. It seemed to.
Saying, in that statement, Laura, and Wendy, I'll come to you next. I'm just trying to be clear on what you're saying, Laura. You're saying that right now a proponent comes in, we have this criteria, our staff says, well, you can go up to $200,000 if that's the cap. So therefore that becomes the number they use as they proceed. What you're saying is, the staff get what you're, if you're suggesting this, that when a proponent wants to come in and ask that question, it should be to the board, not the staff.
Well, or the staff should be saying there's a slide, the board is going to evaluate this based on priorities on a sliding scale. You should know that this, the scale, it's based on need, and it can go up to 200,000, but that's only if you hit, our priorities, and, you have some.
Well, let's put that right in the wording, and I think staff does that anyways, but I don't know that because I'm not sitting at the table. But when I have, I have heard them say, well, you could go up to whatever the cap is, and so anyways, but yeah, I would think we could kind of institutionalize that pretty simply, couldn't we? Yeah, Laura, would you be comfortable as long as we did that?
Yes.
Thank you. Wendy, back to Wendy and then Elizabeth. Wendy.
Yeah, I would just, based on my year and a half plus involvement with the local planning committee, I think we can't underestimate the community's desire for more smaller infill projects versus the larger scale projects. I mean, I think everyone wants housing until you start saying there, and then it becomes, the issue. But what I'm sensing is that I think we have a tremendous opportunity in this community for that infill development, or taking something that was commercial retail that's abandoned and turning it into nice housing. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay. Elizabeth, please.
No, that largely echoed my comment.
Okay. So any more discussion? Board, where are we on this? Well, Mark, please.
Yes, I like the approach about a sliding scale, incentivizing different types of projects, and I agree with Wendy that I don't think we necessarily should ignore the smaller projects. That's all we've been seeing since I've been on this board for 12 years with you, is these small projects. It's very difficult for us to cite a large project. I don't think we're going to see those very often. And Laura brings up a good point about those types of projects. And I would love to see one happen, but I don't see it in the horizon necessarily. And so I think we need to move forward in infill type of projects that Wendy talks about. I think are just as important. Our community needs housing now. And if is there something we can do to help incentivize that, I would support that. And I like the idea of that sliding scale. We could have staff maybe help us draft some of the language to include in the new NOFA that would provide an outline of what that might look like to an applicant. I would like to see, us more involved in that upfront process of reviewing a project so that it doesn't feel like a done deal before they come to us, with what the incentive or contribution is going to be from the trust.
Okay, so at this point, are we referring it back to Jillian with a recommended maximum amount for her to try to, provide us back what Mark's just summarized? Is that where we're at?
At least a sliding scale.
Okay. Are we all clear on what that means? Somebody read.
No, I mean,
Thank you.
I'm not to wordsmith it, but I would be more
Okay.
comfortable in sort of, I think, in capturing the intent of this discussion, if we could sort of put some words on paper relative to the evaluation criteria. I think what I hear you saying is that the trust seeks to prioritize projects that are leveraging other funding sources and that produce, a larger number of affordable overall units relative to the total relative to the number of units in the total project, and that maximum awards will essentially consider this more favorably, but that we also understand that small infill reuse types of development are community priorities, and the trust will look favorably on those projects as well. I don't feel like I'm capturing it.
Well, to me, in my mind, I was trying to maximize the number of units we get. And even though what Wendy said, I agree and believe, which is, many times, well, I don't know if you get an economy of scale out of I would assume you would with, I always hear them say the more density, the less per unit, and therefore it makes the ability to achieve the affordable more realistic. But in this sense, we're trying to get more housing units. So my thought was maybe we put a 150 maximum cap on whatever our definition of small is, and then or maybe that's the definition for all projects, unless you can demonstrate that you can get more and go to this larger level, and then in that case we will consider up to 200. Um, that's what was in my head, but again, I don't know if that has merit in its approach.
Through the chair,
Yes, please.
a question, are you focused more on the percentage of units that are affordable or the number of units? Because I think
Well,
I'm
I
kind
think
of
actually either, because we're trying to achieve both.
right.
But I think
Okay.
when you can go above and beyond what you require, like if you're required for a certain percentage, and then you just come in the per unit for the certain percentage, the cap would be less than somebody who comes in with a greater percentage. Laura?
Our policy has been that if you're only coming in at what's required, that we wouldn't give you anything because you're
Right.
required to do it under inclusionary.
Right.
That's something I'd really like in the NOFA so that it's understood,
Good.
because it's harder to tell somebody coming in that that's what it is if it's
Yep.
not in the note.
I believe it is in the NOFA.
I couldn't find it.
I also think that housing, Mark makes a good point that affordable housing is one thing, but we're also an economic development trust. That's why I'm sitting here. I'm not the housing expert, but the economic impact of constrained housing is real, and it is part of what's causing businesses to have to do extraordinary things, including close down. So if we can create more market rate housing with our trust funds, I think that's a suitable use of our funds.
But we can't. We can incentivize
Well,
affordables, but we
100%.
can't fund market rate housing.
CPA can fund up to 100% of our immediate.
Right.
Right. But if we also have mitigation on another project, those funds are are treated differently. So I just think that we should.
Right,
So
we just don't.
rather than, I think we could probably talk about this for quite a while
Yeah, we could.
and maybe never get to where I have suggested we might consider going. So here's I'm jumping ahead of my thought. I'm sorry. Um, I'm not uncomfortable with capping it at 200,000, but within that have clear statements in the NOFA of that is not what you walk in and assume you get, and having a clear criteria of how the proponent communicates this and why we would go incrementally up. And I don't know how to set the floor and the ceiling here, but how we would incrementally go up to get to even considering that cap. Um, and keep it a little simpler. That's for me. But because it's a max and we control it, um, I'm not uncomfortable with it. That's all. So I'm just trying to find a way, Laura, to make sure that we have those controls in place, that it just isn't assumed and then they come in and ask for 230.
That's exactly what I'm concerned about as
Yeah.
well.
So to me, it's about controls, but
Right.
Mark?
And right now it's 200 to 300. So I think we have to, what's in there. So I think we have to, have it, 200 is if that's going to be the cap, that's going to be the cap. But
okay.
yeah.
Mark, do you have a thought?
Yes, I like where you were going with your thought actually, but I was thinking we start with a floor, and then award additional funding when they meet certain criteria, but we need to define what those are.
Okay.
That would get them up to the max.
Okay. So if you're an eligible project, you start at a certain amount, and then based on that criteria, you could go up to our maximum, with certainly board approval, to do so. Okay.
Assuming the project needs the funds.
Correct.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That should be like the first, or one of the first, criteria, Laura.
I know. I just had to say it out loud.
Okay.
I have other. Are we done with that? I don't know if we're finished. If we have to.
Well, just so I think we've got the cap, Jillian. If we go to 200, what do you think the floor should be? 0? I mean,
Well, obviously that would be a denial, but I would say maybe 50. I mean, is that, well, I guess no, not really, because you might have a project that really for the market rate units, if they have a market component, don't need any additional financing, but perhaps they do for just the affordable units. And so
yeah, the floor, I'm struggling with the floor a little bit just because it seems contrary to the conversation that, no one should come in feeling that they're entitled to funds. But, I think the idea that we will start you with this, we start looking at this and then, build on based on the merits of the project.
Well, so you have criteria that builds on itself. If you meet this set of criteria, you can get 75,000.
Which is where we're at now. So I would suggest that as a good number and a good starting point for the conversation.
And then you go from there, what would allow you to build to a maximum of 200? Laura, what's your thought?
Deeper subsidy, higher percentage, those things.
8%, yeah, 8%, higher percentage,
When you say higher percentage, you mean higher more affordable.
More
that's
units
deeper.
Of the percent.
More units affordable.
More units, more affordable.
Right.
And
that's part of it. Part of its location, I think.
Right.
Whether it's reuse, obviously not a ground up, or it could be a raise and replace, but reusing the land, not.
So
that's a priority of CPA anyway. So we probably
some entities focus on energy efficiency and sustainability aspects, design criteria. I mean, there's so many things that we can pull in.
While we have, and Wendy, did you have a comment too? No. Okay. But Bob, hi Bob. How are you, sir? you're here, so I'm going to ask you a question. You're listening to our conversation. Do you have any suggestions for us that might help us achieve what we're describing here?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
I have been listening to your conversations, and these are the same conversations that every other affordable trust has. Uh, and, the only solutions that I've seen that have been effective to create more affordable housing is communities contributing a lot more money than they traditionally have, and then also partnering up with other nonprofit entities that have other funding sources in order to construct more affordable housing. For example, Neighborhood Works has built some affordable housing projects that are designed as veterans housing. Habitat for Humanity has built some regular low and moderate income housing units and then some extra low income housing units. And that's the only other thing that I've seen done. And then occasionally you can convince a property owner to add an accessory dwelling unit uh, to their existing home that can somehow be restricted in perpetuity. But the changes to the regular zoning laws through the Commonwealth making accessory dwelling units by right seem to have thwarted any financial
Benefit, yeah.
incentive that anybody might get to add an affordable unit on their regular home. So again, those are the only other ways I've seen people successfully get additional affordable housing units by partnering up with the nonprofits that are building some type of specialized housing.
Thank you. All right, Liz, where are we?
I mean, I'm just gonna say, I know that, we had a lot of conversations with the council yesterday about creating innovative solutions to produce affordable housing, but, to reflect on Bob's comment, I think it's generous contributions to projects by towns and zoning is the answer, really. So, we brought this forward to try to address the first one, and obviously we'll continue to have conversations about zoning with our community.
Laura?
I'll just interject, having the state come through with a small projects, community scale is what it used to be called. They stopped funding it. There's a lot of momentum to get that back. So it's 20 units or less. They don't all have to be affordable, but it's subsidy funding from them. It usually and it happens out of round, so people don't have to wait. Something that we're working on. So if you're talking to legislators, it's something that working on both on the rural side, rural community side, and also the seasonal community side. And this would help with those infill projects because it would be, $200,000 or $250,000 a unit subsidy. So just a plug for that. That's a way that would certainly be helpful to augment our funds.
I mean, I talk to Kippy and Julian all the time, and I know Julian's on this housing master plan the state's going to do. He's on that committee. So, Laura, if you have something you want to share with me, please do it.
I will. Yeah, and I'm on the public lands. My boss is on the Unlocking the Commonwealth. I'm on a committee for seasonal communities. So, again, we should share.
I need somebody to summarize for me where we are on this one. And I know Laura has other questions. So let's summarize on this issue of the maximum, if you could, what you think you've heard. Elizabeth Jenkins, I'm calling.
Yes, I'm processing. So what I think I've heard is that, the trust will continue to aim for gap funding projects starting at, let's say, $75,000, but will consider awards up to $200,000 a unit, obviously at the full discretion of the trust. just because it's reflected in the NOFA. It's still subject to full evaluation by the Affordable Housing Trust, and that the trust seeks to prioritize projects that are leveraging other funding sources and that produce a larger number of overall units as affordable units as part of the total project, as well as units that are more deeply affordable. And in addition, projects that represent small scale, missing middle, infill, reuse types of development. And that for these types of projects, assuming they, and in consideration of the other evaluation criteria that are in our NOFA, awards will be made up to, and I leave the number to you. Ours was 200 to 300, but what I'm hearing is up to $200,000 a unit.
I'd make it real clear that to go beyond the floor, the board needs to have, X, Y, and Z for consideration, so that the proponent doesn't come in and take 200,000 times what they think they're going to do. They come in and they take 75 times what they think they're going to do. And then from there, we have the opportunity to, evaluate and perhaps grant greater amounts. Wendy, did you put your hand up for a moment or?
No, I'm looking at the notes. I think you guys got all the talking points. I think that a design component was one of the criteria. Sustainability is not a bad idea, but no, I think you've hit all the things that I could agree with.
Thank you. Laura, you were going to comment, unless you have another comment on this, you were going to comment beyond?
I was going to comment beyond, yeah. First of all, the definitions for affordable and community housing have housing costs incorrect for home ownership. Home ownership does not include utilities. And it should include, it says condo, I think it says condo fee, but it should also include, there we go. Okay, it does have homeowners fee. I couldn't remember. Yeah, utilities is not included in home ownership. So that was one. Just to look for the that we wouldn't fund inclusionary or units that were required by zoning, which are two different things. And then there's a new section on programmatic services or activities or something. I don't know, support, maybe it says support. And this is contrary, we have community preservation funds. Most of this is contrary to community preservation eligible funding. We can't fund support except for rental assistance. If it's rental assistance that we're looking at,
is what really we're aiming at here, Laura.
Yeah, that's then we should say it, because this makes it look like we're funding social services or existing nonprofits and housing service providers. We can't support them except for administering either down payment, closing cost assistance, or rental assistance.
Well, I'll say, CPA has certain restrictions on funding, but again, being aspirational, we would certainly like to diversify our funding sources to be able to fund broader community housing needs, including direct assistance. But Jillian and I, have been working specifically on rent assistance. I think that's another sort of conversation for another meeting, right. But we wanted to, I think, bring to the trust the idea that we did want to look at at least the potential to be able to fund not just units, but support for nonprofits and for individuals who are struggling with income limitations and cost burden.
So Laura, is what you're
Yeah.
saying that in the third line where it says other eligible programs and services, you think it should be state as housing assistance?
No, I think the whole paragraph should just reflect what we're looking for. If we're looking for rental assistance, we should say rental assistance. This would
Okay.
solicit proposals for,
Yeah, it's vague. I
family
mean, eligible programs
self-sufficiency.
and services is vague, yeah.
Yeah, and it could, financial literacy, all those kinds of things are, are support for, low-income folks, but it's not what CPA
Right.
allows. If we had
Oh.
other money, we have very little other money. If we had other money, we could put out a NOFA for that money. But right now, primarily all we could do is rental assistance or down payment and closing cost assistance. And down payment and closing cost assistance becomes a loan because you got to have a recapture. And so that is a whole bigger.
So again, I mean, I don't know what we'll do. Are we working with this paragraph, or are you saying eliminate it and restate it?
I would eliminate and restate. I would just say that we may issue a RFP for proposals to administer I think we have to have that vote, but to administer a rental assistance program.
You could say
that.
Based on funds available, the trust will periodically issue requests for proposals. You just put it right up front, based on funds available or appropriate funds available.
For rental assistance, isn't that
Yeah.
the key? But isn't that the key statement, Laura?
I think so. I don't, right now, we can't fund anything else
Understood.
under CPA. So,
All right,
or
Elizabeth,
we're limited.
Yep, Elizabeth, you had your hand up.
Yeah, and maybe what we need here is just clarification. We're certainly not looking for trust support to issue an RFP for rental assistance. That's a much bigger conversation. But I think what we didn't specifically state this as an eligible use of trust funds. I am personally of the opinion that we don't have to in our NOFA, and that if we have direction from the trust to pursue this outside of this document, that we don't necessarily need to muddy the waters with this in the NOFA at all. Jillian was concerned that it wasn't specifically listed as an eligible activity in the NOFA and wanted to bring it to attention of the trust. But I would suggest if it's going to create confusion, to just strike it, and we will come back to the trust with a larger discussion of that rental assistance program at a subsequent meeting.
I'm fine with that. Anybody, is there anybody who does not want to do that? Okay, seeing none. Okay, additional comment? Laura, did you have more?
I'm just looking at my notes. Hold on
Oh,
a second.
sure.
No, again, just adding a paragraph about inclusionary, and I think that was it.
Okay. So how would the board like to proceed with this modified approach? Do I have any sort of recommendation? Do we turn it back to Jillian, bring it back at the next board meeting? Do we, vote on something subject to her modification? Where are we at?
I think in either case, it has to come back because we have to
Yep.
see it before it goes out. So
Yep.
I would be more inclined to say redraft it and
Right.
redraft the language and bring it back.
Good. Well, so
And
we'll
then we
take it
can-
under advisement. Elizabeth and Jillian, are you relatively clear on what you're gonna do?
Yes, sir.
And you'll
Yes,
bring it
sir.
back
And
at
you'll
the
tell
next-
us when we go astray. Thank you.
You'll bring it back at the next board meeting?
Yes, sir.
All right, board members, are you okay with that? Wendy, yes. Mark? Yes. Laura, thank you.
Yeah.
I am too. Okay. I think, did we cover everything in topic number 1? Because we went through the
Hope so.
scope as well, right?
We
Yeah.
did, yes.
Good. Okay. All right. Topic number 2, approval of the minutes from February 23rd, 2024.
I approve up until 9:37 p.m. when I left.
Okay. Do we have so is that do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. Any comment? Seeing none. Wendy Northcross,
Yes.
Laura Schufeld,
Yes.
Mark Milne,
Yes.
Mark Ells, yes. Okay. Matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair. I don't have any today. So we'll move on to updates from staff. Is it Jillian or Elizabeth?
Well, I'll just do A was the home action plan. They have a public hearing coming up. And the deadline for comments is May 9th. The plan is available on the county website. And the public hearing will be April 16th at 3 p.m. It is a Zoom meeting, and they have the Zoom info on their website.
Okay, thank you. The 4B is Marston's Mills School property. Elizabeth, who's speaking to that?
Yep, just wanted to make the trust aware that we are moving forward with a master planning effort for the Marston's Mills Elementary School property. And again, you have the public meeting information in your packet. We'll be doing that April 30th, 6 p.m. Liberty Hall. And then there's an on-site meeting on the property May 4th at 9 a.m. I think that's on a Saturday. So if any trust members are interested in commenting or joining that project, stay tuned. And there's a project website, and we will be taking public comment on the future of that town-owned property.
Great, thank you. Yes, Laura, please.
I don't know if it's the appropriate time to ask, but through you, Mr. Chair, to Elizabeth, I saw in the paper that the wind project is still saying that their affordable housing restriction is only going to be for 40 years for the 25%. I did not see that come up for a vote to get a waiver from our inclusionary. Can you just tell me where that stands?
They have not asked for a waiver from our inclusionary ordinance. So I anticipate that they'll be in full compliance.
Okay. They just are, it's just out there that it's going to be 40 years. And I haven't seen anything different. So just hoping someone's in conversations with them about it.
Well, so to help me here,
Sure.
Elizabeth or Laura, who are you're saying somebody have conversations? Who in
So-
your mind, what are you sharing with me or us?
Wynn is
So
well
there's-
aware that we have a local requirement that at least 10% of units in projects be permanently deed restricted affordable at 65%. Anything above that is at the discretion of the developer, but they know we have that requirement and they have not asked for any waiver from that requirement.
Okay.
But publicly, they're saying they're doing 25% for a restriction at 40 years, at 80%. So, and it was reinforced.
I'm not in charge of Wynn's messaging. I'm in charge of regulatory compliance. And I will tell you, I know that we've made it very clear to them that we have that requirement. So.
Okay, in the Cape Cod Times, you're quoted as saying that this is this project at those. So I just, maybe they got the quote wrong.
That's not correct, no.
Okay.
All right. Well, go back and look at that and make sure clarification is
Yeah,
needed.
I wouldn't have said that because I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know, and I actually told the newspaper to go back and talk to Wynn because I wasn't aware.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura.
So,
Uh,
so I,
yes, please.
can I just, so who is overseeing the, the permitting, you know, the approval of those units as affordable?
I don't understand your question.
So they have to be, either LIP or,
Yeah.
LAU approved. I heard they were doing tax credits, so then they would be under the tax credit program.
So
Who
they'll
in
be
the
required
town,
to submit a LIP application, yeah.
okay, they said that they have all permitting except for, building permit. They're not supposed to get a building permit until they have approval for the LAU units.
They have their zoning approval.
Okay. All right, I just don't know. I'm just wondering who's monitoring the situation, that's all. It seems like it's nobody.
We're in close contact with the developer and I'm very confident that they're going to proceed in compliance with all regulations.
Are you confident that they won't get a building permit until they have LAU approvals?
I am confident that they will be in compliance with all of the requirements of our inclusionary ordinance. Yeah. Which I believe, and I'm not looking at it, but I believe that is the requirement in chapter 9. But we'll go back and look, and I guarantee they will proceed in compliance with the ordinance.
Because they, in the past, developers have not. They've got the building permit anyway. I'm just, and their occupancy. So I'm just trying
Is
to
this
stay
a
on top of
matter
it.
for the trust, Laura?
I would not be surprised to see Wynn before the trust, and then certainly the trust will be able to condition awards and permits as you see fit.
Okay.
To your question, Wendy, it's either here or it's at the council. I just don't see any monitoring being done or any oversight.
All right. I will, Laura, as chair and as town manager, I will ask the questions. Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Topic for discussion number 5, future meetings. We already put this one forward. Yes, Laura.
We haven't come back to increasing the membership. We were supposed to have a procedural. We voted to do it,
Great,
and to
let's
find the
We'll have
process.
Jillian put it on the agenda. I'd like a justification for the increase, because I do believe it falls to the town manager to make that sort of a change. So,
If I could, through the process, we did look at what it would take to add new members. Your current declaration of trust indicates 5 members. So it would be an amendment to the declaration of trust. And the appointment of members is at the discretion of the chair.
but as understood, but I want to understand, I don't have a better word, value added by expanding the trust. I want to understand, I want a justification to explain to me why I would consider doing it. Okay?
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Great, we'll put that on, is the next agenda or a few beyond that? What do you recommend?
I think we could add that to the next agenda because we're going to be bringing back primarily the amendments to the NOFA. And that's all I have at the moment. Potentially, you could have an application, which would throw things in a different direction. But I think at the moment, I'll endeavor to put that forward.
Thank you. Let's try to get that on the next agenda. Any other? Okay, seeing none. All right, our next meeting is on May 3rd at 9 a.m. Jillian, just make sure you run a check with everybody and make sure we'll have a quorum for May 3rd. I think I'm around. My summer though, I'll just share with you all in my other capacity. I've been asked to take vacation time, which I have not been over the last 8 years. And so one of the days that I'm going to try to take, um, besides when trying to think my daughter comes home in July, and then my three children, imagine 3 children in college, 3 children go off to college. Um, you know, I'm going to take Fridays. Long statement, short answer. So just know that it may be problematic for Fridays in the summer for me. Okay. And I'm not planning on just coming in for an hour. So I'm fine if you choose to meet without me and Andy can chair, but make sure Andy is here, okay? So you should double check that. So I'll just share that with you. And but I will be here May 3rd and probably the meeting in June as well. To me, summer doesn't start till the months of July and August. So
Thank you.
any further discussion? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Wendy. Second. We'll go do roll call. Wendy,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mark Ellis, yes. Thank you.